gather in Egypt for COP27.
Let's get more now on the COP27 climate summit in Egypt. Day three's focus has been on finance, as we've been reporting, with a push to create a new loss and damage fund to support poorer countries who have done little to cause climate change, but of course bear the brunt of its effects. Let's talk to Mangaliso Ndlovu, Zimbabwe's Environment, Climate, Tourism and Hospitality Industry Minister. Minister, welcome to the programme. Thank you very much indeed for your time. From what you're seeing there, given your country's perspective and your experience, is this anything other than a talking shop so far?
Thank you so much for having me. And thank you so much for this very important question. I think every year when we gather in these conference of parties meetings, what is more important is it's really to justify our presence here, especially to the suffering communities that we live in our respective countries, particularly with respect to the developing countries, the least developed countries who are severely affected by climate change. And as you have already highlighted, a phenomenon that we least contributed to. My biggest worry is that I'm not seeing the traction. I'm seeing a lot of rhetoric, a lot of pledges, promises, a lot of noise around critical issues. So I have no doubt that at this point, no one can deny the existence of climate change. It's no longer a myth to some as people used to. But the challenge remains that we come here, we plead cases, we commit to do things, people make promises. Year after year, nothing is happening. We need to get to a point where leaders meet on such platforms and we hear, especially the big polluters, not committing, but reporting the progress from the previous conference of parties, what they have done to make sure that they are reducing their emissions, what are they doing to make sure that they are contributing in helping the developing countries to be able to cope with the adverse effects of climate change. It's undeniable that a lot of these countries in the developed world developed using fossil fuels. They have the financial muscle to help the developing countries transition in a just manner, transition in a manner that will not compromise the development aspirations of those countries, that will not compromise the suffering communities. But from what I'm seeing, I'm afraid it's nothing short of a talk show.
Well, that's a very gloomy analysis. Let me ask you then, from an African perspective, perhaps from a Zimbabwean perspective, what does COP27 have to deliver for you to view it as a success and be optimistic about the outcome in a few days' time?
There are a number of issues that, from a Zimbabwean perspective, but also from an African perspective, that we have raised and which are very critical. The first and most critical one for us really is to make sure that the issue of climate financing is dealt with. And it's a moving target, if I may put it that way. It's a moving target in that the developed countries committed to contribute $100 billion annually, and this was supposed to start in 2020. We were shocked last year when we were in Glasgow, when the reports from the developed countries indicated that they had contributed $83 billion for last year towards climate financing. And it was clear at that point that there is need for a clear definition of what we mean by climate financing. That is the first part. Secondly, whether or not climate financing should come in the form of a grant or in the form of loans. A few countries that can demonstrate that they have contributed to developing countries' efforts in fighting climate change have done so in the form of loans. And again, that's another problem that we are creating. In the near future, there will be huge debt burden, which is climate related, which we want to avoid. So the critical issue first is climate finance that has to be defined. And we would want a situation where we have a specific fund, climate fund, and clear guidelines on how countries can access these funds. Of course, we don't want to compromise the processes, so they still need to make sure that there are bankable projects that are done, but a clear process has to be identified.
Minister, thank you very sorry to interrupt you. The time is against us somewhat, and I wish we had more time, but we're very grateful for your expertise and your time. Thank you very much indeed for coming.